All right, Yvonne, we're ready.
All right. First, I just want to say thank you to Hilda for all the preparation work. I'm really excited to share with you today, to have hope to share with you anyway, how we have refined our recommendations. I think they really are going to make sense for everyone. Thank you, Mark, for agreeing to share the meeting. So I'll turn it over to you right now.
Thanks, Yvonne. Do we want to just do a quick roll call, or do we want to, it's right at 10:30, why don't we go ahead and do that? Seth, if you can, and while he's doing that, I just want to take just a little bit of time to just share our thoughts and prayers and condolences going out to Reynolds right now. Obviously, that's a tragedy, once again, that Oregon is unfortunately feeling, and so our thoughts are with them this time right now.
Mark, I've been traveling. I don't know what's happened. Would you tell me?
Well, I don't want to go into specifics because I don't have everything confirmed right now, Yvonne, but there was a shooting at Reynolds today and there were some deaths.
Oh.
So,
Thank you for letting me know.
you bet.
Yvonne Curtis,
Present on the phone.
Mark Mobihill,
Here.
David Reeves, Lynn Saxton,
Here.
Kay Turan, Kim Williams.
Thank you.
This is going to be pretty much an informational meeting because, as you can see, we don't have a quorum either on the phone or present. We have quite a few folks out, but nevertheless, we're going to move forward. We have some very important agenda items and presentations that we're looking forward to. So the first item is approval of the agenda. I'm just going to move past that. We do not have a quorum. We also have item 3, approval of the minutes, the same. So we'll move past those. So let's go ahead and go right to the 2-minute up. Oh, Hilda?
I would request that any edits to the meeting notes, if you could go ahead and send those to me, that would be appreciated.
Okay. So item 4.1, 2-minute updates, Early Learning Council, Lynn. You are on.
All right. Well, thank you, and I'm glad. Did I hear that Kim is going to be able to join us this morning?
No, she's not going to be able to join us. She just called in an hour ago.
Okay. All right. I wanted to defer to her if she was going to be able to join us. Okay, here we go. Here's where we are. First of all, we had a fabulous meeting in Pendleton, and Mark, we appreciate, I've thought about it many times. I've thought about all the cool things I saw. I thought about how the community was really working together to drive to results, and so thank you for being a wonderful host, tour guide, and that was a very productive meeting, really enjoyed it. We have, at that meeting, in fact, the Early Learning Council awarded nearly $4 million in kindergarten partnership and innovation program funds to over 50 communities, serving 20,000 kids and families. The grant was our investment. The grants were our investment. I'm always sensitive to my grammar in these meetings with all these educators, were our investments in communities to design and deliver really innovative approaches to create new paths to school success. And I think our approach was very investment driven, and I think that probably was a new experience for some of our recipients because we didn't just fund everything that was asked for. I think we were very structured and disciplined in those investments and in our expectations. So I appreciate all the communities we were working with being receptive to a new approach in this round. So we were excited to do that. We also had our first joint meeting with the State Board of Education. That was in Pendleton on May 22nd. This was tremendously exciting, the first 5-star rating for a Head Start program to the Umatilla Moro Head Start. And that just is exciting on many levels, not the least of which is obviously the work that went into making that program a 5-star program. Always want to reward and recognize hard work, but also it really sets the pace. It shows it can be done. Very excited to see rural Oregon leading the charge and showing it can be done. So that was a really nice, really exciting moment for all of us. We were joined by Dr. Kent Thornburg from Oregon Health Sciences University, who gave an overview of how the early life environment changes the development of organs and overall growth of the unborn child, making that child more or less vulnerable to disease later in life. I think it really was a game changer for all of us who attended and were able to see that presentation. I would encourage people who haven't seen that presentation to seek out opportunities to do so. It's really a game changer in terms of understanding that if those organs, if those critical organs are not supported in their development at the front end, the education ramifications are very, very serious and have long-term implications. So obviously there's more to learn there, but if you haven't seen that presentation, please find an opportunity to do so. He's a very articulate spokesperson, and it really is a game changer in how we think about those first months, and really helps us strategically think about what investments we need to be making, because if those things don't happen as well as they should, the rest of the game can be severely jeopardized in terms of attaining success for kids. Finally, we've been working with Head Start and OPK programs to increase slots, and we will be awarding 372 additional slots to OPK programs. Since that meeting, our fearless leader, Jada Rupley, has notified us that she's completing her 2 years of service to the Early Learning Council. We all are greatly appreciative of her work, and the Early Learning Council will be, in the governor's office will be working on finding her replacement. So that's my summary. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Not so much questions, but just reinforcing the wonderful visit we had in Pendleton. It was great seeing the Early Learning Council up. We had a chance to go on a tour and see actual hands-on events going on, you know, our initial beginning with work as a hub. And again, Lynn, I would agree that the doctor's presentation is a game changer. I'd recommend that we, whether it's our best practices group or the Early Learning Council, looks at, you know, more opportunities for him to speak, because it really was powerful, especially the nutritional aspect. That's what kind of hit me. And I also think that, you know, it's not easy to coordinate those kinds of events, Lynn, but they really have a huge impact on the community when you come. And we've been talking about that visit for several weeks now, and just how much of an impact it made for our educators in the field. So kudos to you and the crew. It was a wonderful visit.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Lynn, did you have anything else to add on your 2 minute? Okay.
Nope, that's it.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
You bet. 4.2 is higher ed, and Dave is gone, so we'll move right to 5.0, which is the developmental ed workforce with Elizabeth. I asked Hilda again to follow up on this. I loved your presentation. Even though we're small, we're excited.
Good.
So we're ready.
So just as a preface for those who are on the phone too, this is exciting work that we've been monitoring throughout the year, and kudos to Elizabeth and her colleagues and Phil Goning, who helped facilitate this process. I had the opportunity to go to the first meeting and thought this is a big lift and a high expectation, short time frame, and they certainly met and exceeded that. And Nancy Golden and Ben Cannon and I and a number of other guests were delighted to be able to attend the a meeting to hear those recommendations from the folks. So Elizabeth, we're glad you're with us.
Good. Thank you for inviting me, Hilda. I appreciate it. For the record, Dr. Elizabeth Brand, Director of Research and Communications for the Community
So
Colleges.
this is Lynn, and excuse me, I apologize for interrupting. I think we need to get Elizabeth closer to the mic because I can't hear her.
Is
Let's
this
try
better?
this again.
That better, Lynn?
Say something else.
Yep, thank you.
That good? we'll run with it.
Lynn, are you able to hear Elizabeth now?
A little better, but she still sounds like she's in another room.
Tell you what we'll do is we'll move the phone bridge and get it closer to Elizabeth. If there's three of us, we're sure gonna accommodate you, Lynn.
say I'm
It's
trying
okay,
not to
I can-
swallow
I've got
this
her
thing.
turned off full bore, and I've got her PowerPoint, so I'm sure I can put it.
Okay, we're gonna move the phone bridge right by,
How about a chair?
does it reach all the way?
This is other duties as assigned, so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Try that.
Thanks. And I'm going to apologize in advance. Apparently the grass pollen has gotten to me, to my little Iowan lungs today. So I brought some water. Hopefully I can not croak through this too much. So I apologize. Again, Elizabeth Brand, Director of Communications and Research for Community Colleges and Workforce Development. I'm very proud to say that this group has finished their recommendations in less than a year. It's been fantastic work. Hilda asked me to come in and just to update you all on the work that's been done, and unfortunately we had our last meeting last Friday, and a few tweaks were made to some of the recommendations, so what you have is not the final copy. We're still working on that. Overall, we are going to have our final report out by the end of the month.
Is there anything substantially different or is it tweaks?
It's tweaks. They were things like, and I'll talk a little bit about the recommendations in the back, but there wasn't anything that was earth-shattering, stop the boat kind of thing. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background so that there's an understanding about why we even were undergoing this work. So this is some information about the age of our community college students. Just so that you can get a better idea, our average age is about 28 for our credit students. And our race and ethnicity, we're still working on this. We need to get better data, but with the redesign of our data system and with being able to match with other entities, we're hoping that we can get much cleaner data going forward. That one's pretty much not anything. Direct from high school is probably one of the biggest things to take of note. The students who are coming to the community colleges are not those that are graduating from high school and enrolling in the next year. They just aren't. We get roughly 10% of our credit enrollment that are students that are coming directly from high school, and this is reflected in the graph. So again, they may come a year or two after school, after they graduate from high school, but they're just not coming directly from high school.
10% are direct.
Yes. Yeah, in any given year, that's about the top. And of course, as we move forward and with Smarter Balance and with all of those types of things, this is something that we're needing to keep in mind as we're looking at using Smarter Balance as an assessment, as a placement tool, because if it's only good for that year after college or after high school, we're still going to be missing a lot of students as far as the community colleges are concerned. This is another big indicator of our credit students. 84% are part-time. So our students are the working adult students who have all the extra responsibilities outside of classroom, families, children, work, all the other types of challenges that they face even to get into the classroom. So just a brief idea of who we have in our students. This is some work that Michelle Hedora and the Regional Educational Lab Northwest has done. Yeah, so this is just talking a little bit about DevEd. And this is something that my husband always asks me, so what does that have to do with research when I do various things? And I say, I got tired of looking at the data and thinking we've got to be able to do better than this. I'm certainly not satisfied with the numbers of students that we have that get into developmental education and don't make it out. Mark?
You go back to that slide. I'm really kind of thrown by the 10% statistic.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
That our graduating, like our class of 2014, next fall, only 10%.
They make up 10% of our enrollment.
Okay.
So it's not
So
necessarily.
when I look at that first-time freshman,
Mhm.
those aren't necessarily 19-year-olds.
No,
A first-time freshman could be a 27-year-old.
correct.
In fact, that's more than normal.
Yes, in the community colleges. Yeah, our students tend to be older,
Isn't your average age like 28?
28. Mhm.
It's a really redefinition of what a freshman is. In a lot of
Yes,
people-
absolutely, and
a lot of
that's
people's mind.
what we keep saying. We serve a lot of adults in the community colleges, and so the K-12 reforms and things are going to be fantastic. I just don't know how quickly we'll see a lot of that cake, because we don't serve a lot of those students directly out of high school. And this doesn't even take into account the 300,000 adult Oregonians without a GED or a high school diploma. That's a whole other population. That's another discussion. So moving on with the work group, this is just the general purpose statement that we came up with for the work group. The work group was formed by me. I asked each of the colleges to send 4 representatives from their college to the work group. And the only parameters around it were that they had to have 1 developmental math faculty, 1 developmental writing or reading faculty, and 1 student support services staff member. The 4th one was the wild card. They could pick whomever they wanted. Some picked librarians, others picked another faculty member in the discipline area, but we had a really nice broad swath. One of the things my colleague from OUS, who was at our last meeting, had told me was that the universities are amazed that the community colleges could pull together and do this work. They weren't mandated to do it. I asked them to do it, and I sent them a really tiny stipend of $9,000 to pay for 1 class buyout, basically, for them to do this, because it was important to have the faculty involved.
For each faculty member?
No, for college.
College.
Yeah, $9,000. And Treasure Valley, big kudos to them. They were at every single meeting. So it wasn't for the money. It was for the love of the work. And they showed that consistently. We've been meeting once a month since November. But thanks to Mother Nature, in December and in February, we actually ended up having 2 meetings in May because we had to make up some time because we weren't able to meet in February. But this group came together, and through a partnership with Complete College America, we were able to fly in experts from all across the nation, and they actually addressed the group on various topics, from placement to accelerating the curriculum, to alternate math pathways. There was a lot of different pieces that we looked at. The group had a charge from us. They knew that they were going to have to read research. We gave them homework every time so that they could come prepared, and they dove right in, and it was very exciting. I'm very, very pleased with what they've come through. These were the basic objectives. So overall, their objectives were to read the research, figure out what was working, what could work for Oregon, because we weren't just going to take a cookie cutter approach. Because something works at the community college at Baltimore County, we aren't going to just pick that up and plop it on Oregon. So I wanted them to take a look at it, to actually chew on it, argue about it, and figure out what would work for Oregon. So they were charged to bring recommendations forward to both the HEC, our Oregon President's Council for the community colleges, and for the OEIB. So just to get to the recommendations, you do have the full set in your packet, but there's just a few of them that I wanted to highlight for you. The first one that's listed is the math, and this is probably the one that I'm most excited about, and I don't know if that's the math phobe in me or not, but basically what this is establishment of a non-STEM pathway through mathematics that prepares students who are going into more of a liberal arts degree. There are 4 colleges this fall who are piloting a Math 98 program, which is basically a quantitative literacy program, or literacy course. And any student, if you place into whatever level you might be in, if you're going into a non-STEM pathway, you can take Math 98. After Math 98, they would go into Math 105, which is the transfer level course which is needed for a liberal arts degree at OUS. Currently, all OUS hasn't said, yes, we'll take that and we'll honor that. So this fall, we're getting together faculty from K-12, community colleges, and OUS, and including math colleagues from the Department of Ed, to get together and talk about Math 105 and how that should be accepted as a transfer credit to fulfill the general education for liberal arts. So that's one that's huge. And our student services folks were saying, boy, you don't need to do much more for counseling and mental health than get that through, because that's where they see a lot of the anxiety with students, especially the adult students who haven't taken math for 20 years. That's one that also the JBAC is working on, the Joint Boards Articulation Commission. So it's got some good traction, and I'm pretty excited. I think that's going to go somewhere, and we're actually going to be able to make an alternate pathway for students instead of shoving them all through college algebra. Student support services, we had some of our recommendations which could apply to all students. So obviously, if we talk about mandatory advising, there are some of the community colleges which are currently doing that for all students. But since the charge was specifically for developmental education, we changed some of the wording to say, for developmental education students, this is what we recommend. Placement, this is another one which is pretty exciting. We had a presentation from Nikki Edgecombe, who is from the Community College Research Center at Columbia, and she was talking about the GRIT assessment. And as we were looking at that, this recommendation basically says that community colleges will use multiple measures to place students. Instead of using one test score, there's going to be something else that we utilize. We aren't telling them exactly how, because everybody has different resource needs and different staffing needs, but the point is they're going to do more than just one test score. So some of the colleges have said, we actually, was it Lane? Is actually having no, it's Clackamas. Clackamas is implementing this fall where they actually will talk with a student and have an advising session with a student prior to them even taking the placement test, because they may not even need it. They can come in, they can look at the high school transcript, they can look at the other information that the student provides, and then they can decide if they even need to do that or if they can just place into the college level. The point is that they want to give more students the opportunity to go into college level than not. Nothing?
Can I ask a question on that? Will Clackamas be able to provide the subcommittee with lessons learned from that process, and are they tracking data on that?
Yeah, they will be. Again, it's just getting implemented this fall. And it is actually something, this is another one of the aspects that we're talking about doing a statewide training on, so that individuals will know what does it mean to actually deal with these non-cognitive assessments. How do you score something like that? What are the things that you should be looking for in a student's non-cognitive assessment to help you make a good informed decision about where that student should be placed. So that's another one that we're probably, this one in conjunction with what's happening with the college and career readiness and the Common Core and everything, the placement conversation, we said, let's let that happen in the spring. Because we want to see what's going on with the Smarter Balanced and with the rest of the work that's happening this fall, and then we can move on from there. Placement test prep, it seems simple, but yeah, it seems simple that we just said for students who require a placement test, you should consider doing some sort of preparation prior to letting them do that. At first, the work group had said that students should not be able to take the test on the same day that they find out about it. But we had some of our institutions, in Bend, for example, they had students driving 4 hours to get to campus. And so we weren't going to turn a student away and say, oh, I'm sorry, you have to come back tomorrow and take the placement test. But we are saying there needs to be something online that students can access prior even to coming to campus, or they can go to the computer lab and do something, or they need to have that conversation with an advisor. Something needs to happen so that a student understands that it's a high-stakes test. They need to take it seriously and that this is what it's about. And as they can go through the prep, they might think, oh, you know what, I do need to take a little more time and brush up on this before I actually take the test. but we want the student to make an informed decision. The reading and writing, we're looking at doing a co-requisite model is one of the models that we have. And that's where a student can take a writing course like Writing 121, and at the same time, if they've tested into a remedial writing area, they would take the remedial course as a co-requisite to that course. So the same instructor would teach the regular Writing 121, and then those 10 students, for example, who need the remediation would then meet with that same instructor after that course to continue the additional assistance that they may need.
Yeah, are you ready for questions?
Sure.
This is so relevant to the work that Nancy is leading with the Accelerated Learning Committee. And we sort of knew we were waiting to incorporate some of these recommendations. Just fiscally, is that an additional stipend to that faculty member? How is that being funded?
They haven't decided that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another one of those, why we say they should consider doing those things, because we don't know who has what. For instance, Tillamook Bay has one math instructor, so to put additional burdens on them, we have to be cognizant of what they have available.
Elizabeth, I'm going to get right to what's very, very important to me that I've said several times over that concerns me. And I speak from a K-12 guy, where we have made a lot of progress in eliminating prerequisites. Prerequisites stop first generation kids. Where was the discussion on continuing to have classes like Math 95 paying full tuition, the classes that don't count toward a degree based on a placement test? Where was your conversation? How far did that go in your work? That fundamental belief.
Right. We didn't get into the whole, should it be charged for tuition or not. We didn't get into that route. We got to a point where we were saying that if a student needs to take some kind of remediation based on whatever it is that he or she, it's the placement test and the conversation and the non-cognitive assessment, we want to make that journey as short as possible. We don't want someone to start at Math 20 and pay, and then have to go to Math 60 and pay, and then Math 95 and pay, and on and on. We want to make that journey short. You take this class, it gets you up to speed, then you're in the next class. Eliminating the exit points.
I'm glad to hear that, and that's progress. But where we made substantial change in K-12 is we eliminated anything below Algebra 1 in high school. We used to have pre-algebra, pre-math, 7th grade, 6th grade, we eliminated it. And we said, here's the bar, every freshman, that's the lowest level class we offer. It is interesting to me after we get our KRA results and how far our kids are behind, how much work we have with the hub, and I'm not digressing here. We're stopping kids on the journey when we place them into classes below college. Now, that doesn't mean they necessarily have the skill set when they're 25 and they haven't taken math in 7, 8 years. Okay, I get that. But we've got to move in a direction where kids, like you said, I'm encouraged to hear that this is going to go quick through remediation, or where we could, why offer Math 95? Why the lowest level class Math 105, and we're going to provide support systems all around, but you're in the classroom, you're only paying for a class that counts. Was any of that discussion, are we there yet, Elizabeth?
I don't know where that discussion is happening, Mark. It's probably something that's more for the presidents to decide, because this is more of a policy type of an issue. Because of course, if we have people coming in that have very basic mathematical skills, and they need to have some of those foundational courses. And in order to offer those, that has to be paid somehow. We still have the faculty, we still have the costs that go along with that. Now, someday, maybe when we get everybody graduating through high school and everyone's scoring well on Smarter Balance, then we won't need to be doing those types of things. But when we get a 50-year-old who comes in and maybe didn't even get through high school, we still need to have those resources available. We're meeting our students where they are, and we're helping to get them where they need to go.
but statistically it'll show you that if you're in those remedial classes and you're paying full tuition for them, you don't finish.
Right. Again, which is why we want to hit the one, get yourself skilled up, and then you get to college and you're done. Especially for those that are liberal arts students that just aren't necessarily going to need calculus
That's
in
definitely,
the rest of their life.
definite progress.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some colleges have 5 levels of developmental math. I wouldn't go through that.
Mark, this is Lynn, and I have a question when this discussion is completed.
I think it's good right now, Lynn. Fire
Okay.
away.
Thank you for this report, and thank you for the PowerPoint. It's very helpful. I attended community college, and I'm a big fan of community college. I also sit on the board of trustees for Willamette University, and I'm just curious about and of course one of the challenges where I graduated from Willamette, but one of the challenges liberal arts colleges face is, and I think Willamette is certainly in one space here. I can't speak for the other liberal arts colleges in Oregon, but the notion that the quantitative skills of applicants and students need to be significantly stronger than they used to be because of the unique nature of a liberal arts education, but also because of the fact that a liberal arts education increasingly has to produce marketable skills in the workplace. I mean, you have to be able to leave there and have really exemplary critical thinking skills. So I'm just curious about the notion that there's that calculus, for example, would not be a prerequisite for liberal arts schools, because that's not my experience with the direction Willamette is going, and I just want to see what the thinking is on that.
Actually, Lynn, this isn't meant to be a replacement for college algebra or for calculus. This is meant to give students a choice. So if a student is choosing to go through, they can certainly take calculus and be a philosophy major. That'd be great. But if a student is wanting to go through and be a history major and does not feel like he or she wants to go through the algebra pathway, this is another option for a student. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to give the students options.
I see. I also, and I know I've said this before, but it intrigues me, having graduated from high school in 1972 with 2 years of required calculus for all students in high school, I continue to be concerned that in an era and an age where those skill sets are ever more important, that we're still kind of viewing algebra as something that is, I'm still not clear on why the bar is so low this many years after the fact, and it concerns me. And I'm not being critical, I just would appreciate your thoughts on that, because everything I see, everything I hear, learn in a global economy is that the need for math skills is intensifying, and we're continuing to fall further behind.
And to that, I would say that algebra is just one example of a math skill. There's a lot of other critical thinking and quantitative reasoning skills which are needed for the global economy. So again, this is a choice for a student. Now, we are going to, through JBAC, have meetings beginning in February, I believe, with consumers of math, if you will, so psychology, biology, some of the other areas that people wouldn't necessarily think of as STEM majors, and talk with them about what types of math skills are actually necessary for a student to be successful in that area. We are not lowering the rigor of what a student needs. It's just a difference instead of being an algebraic-based pathway, it's more of a statistical-based pathway. And it's actually proving to be the types of math that the faculty are telling us the students need.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And is that building on the research that was done by Karen Sprague, Joe
Yes.
Baxter, and others? Yeah.
Yep, Karen Sprague is actually leading that work right now with JBAC. And that proposal is in front of the HEC Student Success Committee tomorrow. I'll talk about that. So again, we'll have the full recommendations out the end of the month with the few slight changes to it. For instance, there was one, of course you can understand if you know me, there was one recommendation for the institutions to decide what data to collect, how to disaggregate it, who should be reporting it, and I said, why don't we add in collaboration with the state in that? And so they all agreed. They were, oh yeah, that's a good point. So there's a few slight changes, like I mentioned, but overall, we're pretty excited. The other thing that I'm going to be adding to that, the report, is we're going to have the college presidents are going to be signing an endorsement for this. Because one of the big conversations that happened in the group was mandatory versus non. Do we say that you have to do this or do we not? And it was almost right down the middle as far as who was going to say which way we should go. I erred on the side of not saying it because I said, I don't want all this work to come down to an argument of, see, we told you, the state was just going to tell us what to do. And that's not what it's about. It's about the work. And clearly, as I was telling some of the participants who wanted it to be mandatory, they're doing it anyway. The one who was very adamant about it to be mandatory is piloting the Math 98 in the fall and has 3 sections ready for winter. Like, you don't need me to tell you what to do. You're doing it.
But yeah, you have the word mandatory in the revising and the orientation, so obviously the group felt, hey, this connection with kids isn't an option.
Yeah,
That's
especially with the developmental education students.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you have a lot to be proud of.
Thank you. They did great work.
Nancy, comment?
I just want to thank you for your leadership. I did get to attend one of the meetings, and I could see that, you really did a terrific job of bringing people together and working through issues, and I think this is a big step forward.
Thank you. Thank you. They did great work. They're very passionate.
Anybody have a comment?
This is building again on the research and readings and concept paper for the Accelerated Learning Committee, but wondering if there was any discussion about, as you create that advising model for developmental ed students when they arrive at the community colleges, is there some room and desire to incorporate some representatives from K-12 in that design process to ensure that maybe some of those advising pieces can also be carried out at the junior, senior level, and then they just kind of are creating a more seamless pathway that way too.
Yeah, there was some pieces of this. We have some of the recommendations, and the advising is part of it, but that's more of a holistic student support kind of thing. And again, some of the things that we were talking about could be applied to several different areas. We just felt like we had to restrict it right now to say specifically for our developmental education students, but absolutely. Absolutely, as the colleges are reaching out, and one of the things we talked about consistently was we have to reach out in both directions. We go to K-12, we go to four-year institutions. So we need to make sure that we're connected with both sides very well. As part of, this was phase 1. Phase 2 will begin in the fall, where we are asking the colleges to look at the recommendations and tell us, get teams together. We're going to have a meeting in the fall in September, and come in and tell us what recommendations you're going to work on, and we're going to make implementation plans, and we're going to figure out what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, what it's going to take, and how are you going to measure it to make sure that we know what happened. So that's the next phase of work for the next year.
And there's no explicit call out around college success classes?
There is
Was
for a
that-
first-year experience course.
Okay, it's embedded within that, but was that at all because they're kind of different models? Some are 1 credit, 2 credits, 3 credits?
Exactly, and actually, someone brought up the fact that first-year experience is copyrighted. So,
That term, yeah.
yes, so we have to call it first-year experience programs.
Oh.
So, yeah, so, but everyone does their own type of flavor, which is the beauty of this, because the 17 colleges have 17 different contexts. They have different needs. We have poor white boys who aren't making it in Tillamook Bay, and we have new immigrant Hispanic students coming in at Treasure Valley. We just have a great variance in the context, and so it was the work of this group to leave it at a point that each college could look at their data, look at their challenges in their area, and apply what would be the most get the most efforts for their students.
Just listening to you, Elizabeth, it's so obvious the amount of time, effort, and passion you and this group have put together. I don't think there could be a question right now that we could ask you that you haven't already analyzed, thought, and struggled with. To get these recommendations is awesome. It's a great starting point. Here's something that's in my mind, and I'll take it down to a student level. I'm thrown by the 10% statistic. That's gonna be.
I thought you'd get
That
that.
is now going to be my takeaway for all summer. Because here's an example. Eastern Promise, we've been working with a young lady who is brilliant, first generation Russian. Kid has an unbelievable future. We've been mentoring, working with her as an individual, lining things up for her as an ESOL teacher with her. She'll talk about employability,
Yeah.
Portland Public, David
Yeah.
Douglas, already talked to the superintendents. Well, this morning she says, I've changed my mind, I'm going to work now and take a year. Okay, so here we go. Everything was lined up. Everything. All the wheels were greased. So maybe what we need to look at in our level, K-12, is what are we doing about that transition? When we say commencement means beginning, not an end.
Right.
And maybe culturally, I'm just thinking, telling you what's on my mind right now, that we've got to get kids to get in next fall so that we're not looking at math 9 fall.
Exactly.
And we are working so hard to redefine the senior year and put rigor into the senior year and have kids taking math for 4 years, moving to the Common Core, higher level. We're doing so much effort and lifting, but if we don't get them in the next fall, we're not going to move it up.
Right.
That's just what's on my mind.
We had a lot of discussion about the summer melt
Yes.
Yeah.
in this, and especially the student support services folks were talking about that. How do we partner with our K-12
Yeah.
counselors so that we don't have this summer melt, so that we can continue to
Hand
support
holding
that
for the
student?
individual kid.
Well, texting, Facebook, there's a lot of different studies that are out there that show different methods that folks are using successfully to get these students. So, you know, and many of the colleges have implemented no late registration, which sounds punitive, but it's for the better for the student. If you come in 2 weeks after class starts, you're not going to be successful, most likely.
Right.
So we need to do more about helping students plan for what they're actually going to be doing instead of just kind of falling on it.
Absolutely. So we're kind of tying it up here. Yvonne, Lynn, do you have any questions out there on phone land?
I just wanted to make a comment aligned with you, Mark, and that is, I'm still stunned by the 10% too. And I guess one of the questions I have is, do we have that data by school, and does it look different for each of those schools in terms of percentage of kids coming straight from high school? That's one question, and we don't have to answer it right now. And the other one is, I guess I'm just wondering, now that I know that, what do I need to do to think differently as a school district superintendent? And more importantly, in our work in OEIB, now that we understand that, I still am worried that we're not looking at something when we're looking at getting towards 44-20, and that there's perhaps an area that's just this void we haven't addressed. And I guess it's what I know in my mind about the number of kids from our high school that goes, for example, to PCC, and the percentage of those that are remanded to those remedial classes. And I'm just worried that we're not looking at something we ought to be in light of, and I don't mean to minimize the work that your committee has done, Elizabeth, because I think it's awesome, because now we know these things. And so I'm just wondering, what else do we need to ask? So I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
To answer that, Yvonne, at least somewhat, I don't know if I've talked with this committee about the redesign of our data system that's currently underway. There's one piece of that we are right now piloting with a community college and their K-12 partners, whereby high school districts, ESDs, can upload data directly to our data system, and they get the information back instantly, where you can see the college credits that a student has taken, you can see their grades, you can see whatever it is. Now, the policy question around that is, how long do we track that? One of the presidents said, so great, my high school principal's going to be able to watch me forever. But The point of that is that we are moving toward a new way to get more data and more information out so that it can help the colleges, help the school districts, help the parents. There's a public-facing side to that, so students can have more information so that they can make better decisions.
Okay. Lynn, question?
No, I think that again, the 10% was unbelievable, but good to know. And I concur with the need to correlate to 40-40-20.
Thank you. Elizabeth, just real quick, 10% is for community colleges. You don't know by offhand what the 4 years are?
I don't know what Bob's number is.
I think they're much higher.
Oh, absolutely.
I would think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, thank you,
Welcome.
thank you. Good, great work.
Thank you.
Pulled through with that cold. Thank you. Okay, next up for a 6.0, the draft of instructional assistant career pathway report. We'll turn it over to Hilda and Janelle.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Janelle Ives, who is joining us from the Oregon Department of Education, where she is a specialist for health science and student support services. And Janelle and Jim Carlisle from the Oregon Department of Education and I started meeting this year to look at what House Bill 3254 had required of a plans for career pathways for instructional assistants. And this complemented a number of other agendas that were well underway, one being the need to diversify our educator workforce. We know that that's been given new life by the Senate Bill 755 and the establishment now of a minority educator advisory group and new reports that will be produced much more regularly and disseminated in ways that engage a lot of different partners about what they're going to do to help out with this. So it's been a real pleasure working with Janelle, and this report is due to the legislature in July, but we felt like this was a perfect time to at least bring you the draft document and to have Janelle share some slides outlining it. So that if there are specific quotes that come from this committee that we might embed in our report, so I will be writing things down.
I'm sure
We
you
will enhance the,
That's not been said. There's a quote for you.
we'll enhance the message to our legislators. So thank you so much, Janelle.
Thank you, Hilda, and members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Janelle Ives, and I'm with the Oregon Department of Education. And it's been my pleasure to work these past few months with a great dedicated group of educators from around the state. And this was in response to House Bill 3254, which charged the Oregon Education Investment Board with developing these model career pathways for educational assistants, and to look at guidelines and recommendations for how candidates would enter the programs. The Department of Ed, in conjunction with the Oregon Education Investment Board, convened a steering group of really amazing people, and some of them are in the audience today, to look at what is already existing in the state and to think about the properties of a quality program and conditions that could help this flourish in our state. And they did some really fabulous work, and some of their comments and ideas are included in this report. One of the major concerns and impetus for this bill was looking at teacher diversity. When you look at the diversity of ethnic groups of students compared to educators in Oregon, there is a great, vast difference, especially if you look at one of the fastest growing populations of Hispanics in Oregon. Whereas educational assistants tend to mirror a little bit more closely the ethnic distribution of students in the state. I've learned a lot about educational assistants in doing this program, and they are quite a remarkable group of educators. They do all kinds of tasks in a school, from providing small group instruction to working with some of the neediest students in the class, those with disabilities. They also monitor behavior and help the teachers in some of the large classrooms that have existed. The work they do is vital to the classroom, and the group really wanted the committee to think about educational assistants, their training and providing career pathways in terms of 40-40-20. When you look at graduation rates for students with disability, it's less than 50%. English language learners have very poor graduation rates compared to the rest of the population in general as well. And educational assistants are often the people who are working most closely with these students under supervision of a licensed teacher. So training these education professionals, not only to further them along a career pathway, can also really help those graduation goals of the state. And that was an important thing that they wanted to make sure that the committee heard about. The current requirements for becoming an educational assistant in Oregon are defined under the highly qualified federal regulations of Title 1A. And those include that they have to have a high school diploma and 2 years of college or pass a local assessment. In Oregon, the local assessments for educational assistants vary greatly between districts and meet the needs of the local district, but that does present a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to create a career pathway, because we have individuals with varied backgrounds, from having some pedagogy courses at a community college to having no pedagogy courses but having some experience in taking college courses. So it presents a wide field to pull from for our career pathways. And we do have several community college preparation programs in the state. There are 11 active programs that train paraeducators. And I'll switch between, there's a lot of terms for educational assistants. We stuck with educational assistants, but they're known by many other names around the state as well. We have 3 associate's degrees and a statewide certificate program for them as well. And as you can see, in the past 3 years, the number of students partaking and completing these certificates have really grown in the past year. There was a huge growth of those. So the work of this committee thought that really we need to not only have the career pathway, but look at the preparation of those paraeducators as they enter that career pathway and how they're prepared to enter into it. The most important guidelines that came out of our work was that these individuals are working adults. They may have been out of school for quite some time. They often have family responsibilities and close ties to their community, and that the curriculum that is developed for them and the experiences really needs to acknowledge and honor the work that they've already done, their experiences in the classroom, their expertise in working with small groups of students. And it really needs to be a collaboration between the school district, the community, the ESD, and the community colleges and universities. And it has to meet those needs of that individual who's entering the program and really provide supports so that they can be successful. Again, math, it was very apropos that we're talking right after Elizabeth, because math, again, it can be an issue for some of these adults who are returning to education after many years. We're proposing 3 different models for creating these career pathways, and the first model is based on an expansion or replication of Portland State University's program. They've had a very successful award-winning program called the Bilingual Teacher Pathways Program, and it has created over 283 licensed candidates since 1999, and it has been just a model program with continuous funding and student participation. So we really felt that this is it's a highlight to have in our state and a treasure to have in our state, and that this would be one model that could be used for expansion. Our second model was to take advantage of some of the work that's going on in the state around credit for prior learning, and House Bill 4059 has stated to create standards for credit for prior learning. And the nice thing about this model is that we could take some of the work that's already been going on with the community colleges and their training of paraeducators, look at those outcomes that they have developed for creating quality paraeducators, and also look at the requirements for teacher licensure and align those two pieces. Again, honoring the work and experience that the educational assistants already have received, and use this model to create those partnerships and collaboration, and to create benchmarks and a pathway for students entering this model to earn their teacher license. The third model is to potentially look at Western Governors University competency model. The reason we thought about this is that in the credit for prior learning, the experiences and knowledge that an educational assistant has needs to directly translate into a course in a teacher preparation program. And that doesn't always work. So the educational assistant might have a lot of experience in working with students and in that practical aspect of implementing lessons, but might not have the theoretical understanding of why those lessons were developed. And so there might not be a direct correspondence between their experiences and a specific course. Whereas the competency model would allow them to use all their knowledge and skills and then to fill in the gaps to reach their teaching license. It might be ideal for reaching rural students who might not have access because it's all done online. But it does lack some of the key supports that were identified as really important for these paraeducators. Some of that personal contact and the supports that go on from being part of a cohort and having a community to support them moving forward. So those are our three models, and you have the full report in front of you. If there are any comments or changes or advice before we take this at the end of the month, that would be very much appreciated. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to field them.
Maybe we can start right now with those on the phone. So Lynn and Yvonne, do you have any questions, comments for Janelle?
This is Yvonne. I don't have any questions. I did take some time to really look through that report. I know we have staff members that have benefited in the past from some of the pilots, and some that are really looking forward to this new work. So thank you. It's very thorough, and I love the options.
Okay. Lynn?
Nope, I'm good.
Nancy, Hilda, any comments?
I just had one comment, and that is that we're adding in a section, we need to probably put this in the last version that will go out, but we thought it would be important to include some licensure requirements that Keith Mink, who is also here today, was able to provide that to us, and we still have that to embed in the final report. And then I know that SB signed up for public testimony, but I will be curious. I'll hold my question until you are able to join us.
Joe, great work. I'd really like to, I'm going to explore a little bit more Portland State's model. I think that certainly intrigues me quite a bit. As a former elementary principal, a couple buildings in a rural setting, a lot of times the hires for parapros, ed assistants, whatever the term, it was often folks who were very embedded in the community and actually could be very strong leaders. But what I definitely saw as an issue at the elementary level, especially with our boys at the time, was a disconnect with boys and behavior. And a lot of times the assistants end up doing the heavy lifting with behavioral issues, not just special ed, but title, ELL, all the above, recess duty. And I just wonder if there was any, and this is such an important part of the school, was there any discussion on cultural competency, gender competency, playground supervision, safety, as part of the training?
We didn't go into the specifics of the competencies for the training of the paraeducators, but it was highlighted that the lack of consistency was a concern, and that there was room for ongoing development of those educational assistants even once they enter the program, that could be potentially highlighted with policy or guidance from the state. So that having benchmarks and career pathways and having those trainings available to educational assistants were really
I would
key.
just recommend that these people are so critical to the schools. There aren't many left. They provide the backbone from the kids walking through the door to the after-school program. And we tend to throw them to the wolves. And we tend to not provide, and if we do provide training, we look at content, pedagogical type things, when in fact they are the essence of a school infrastructure. But we don't do any training for that. So that would just be my comments. It's build that within. It's very important.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to thank you. You've developed a bit of an expertise in this, so that's great. I thought the written work you put together was excellent. I do want to say, to me, this is an incredible opportunity to make sure the faces of the teachers reflect the faces of our children. In Springfield, it was in our EAs, or instructional assistants, where we had the most diversity, and we did have a program in the county where we helped our assistants get teaching degrees, and some of them are the strongest teachers we've ever had for multiple reasons, and I want to be clear about them. One is, you know who they are, you know what they can do because they've been EAs in your district for a very long time and working side by side with really skilled teachers. And two, they really teach all of us about culturally specific curriculum. They help our schools become a place where every child's culture is honored. So I want you to know how critically important I think this work is, and it's very exciting to see it moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much, Janelle.
There's my slogan.
That was
Put
good.
it down.
You know,
I got it.
I got it.
Well, I'll tell you, we may be shorthanded up here, but we've got two great presentations. It's pretty cool to see us talking about the right things. This is pretty neat. Okay, moving on to item number 7 then, is the best practices and transitions recommendations. That's you.
So this is rather interesting, given that we have 2 folks on the phone and one member officially here with Nancy to join you, and several that are not here. This document was a process resulting from starting back with every presentation that we heard this year. We went back through, looked at them again. We kept lists of recommendations that the subcommittee members had made throughout the year. And then we began a process 2 meetings ago, as you recall, where we started to sort these. We had them aligned with our scope of action, and we wanted to really figure out which of these might become tasks that we are going to recommend to an agency or to a group to look at next year. Which ones might become potential candidates for strategic investments, which have to be transformational in nature and not be a sort of, well, here's another source of funding forever. And definitely that would result in real outcomes and changes on achievement compacts and reflective of the equity lens. We also wanted to call out things that we know are underway, that we've heard about throughout the year from various groups that have testified or provided resources and information, to be able to say this, as the name of our group reflects, best practices. These are best practices that we're calling out and hoping that they will continue and move forward. And lastly, we felt like there could potentially be some call-outs for policy work, either in state board rules or beyond, that could eliminate a few barriers that we heard about. I will also just do one mention. Yvonne Curtis and I sat down last week and spent quite a bit of time reforming this to try to make it a useful document. And we noted that there were some things that aren't even in here yet that we are so confident that they're moving forward that they're not called out specifically. So we know that timing-wise, we're going to revisit some things and have reports from TSPC on what happens from the redesign of the licensure system, and just keep hearing about that progress. We didn't feel like it needed a call out right now. So our primary task are twofold. One is that we really need to identify those items that are the highest priority and rank them with the criteria that are mentioned here on the directions page, so that those can be submitted to Chair Curtis, who will then work with myself to develop a full presentation and document that has to go to the Outcomes and Investment Subcommittee in July. And we wanted to be able to do this work now so that we can get that ready and send it out to everybody as a draft document to review before the July meeting. The remaining items, those things I mentioned, such as policies and tasks, et cetera, and the call-outs, those will be incorporated into a presentation that will be at the OEIB retreat on August 12th. And we'll kind of refine that and put it into a presentation. So I provided some directions here for the first group that's around strategic investments, and then another set of directions for the remaining policies, actions, and call-outs.
Well, the obvious issue today is it can't just be a Hilda Mark show / Yvonne Lynn from afar. I appreciate the work, and it's kind of nice to see it for me. Maybe what we could do today, Hilda, because we did not have a quorum, we don't have, I'm very hesitant to move it forward without everybody here. Maybe what we could do today, though, for the members that are here, is you to just give a very, very brief hit on a couple of these points. Then we could have a task where we need to do this electronic, because that's a very short timeline. So coming back in July, if this is already to be merged with the
We don't have a scheduled meeting until- so
Right.
we phone.
it's phone conference, but we have to merge this with the outcomes and investments, is what I just heard, what we're talking about before the retreat in August. So I think, how about today, you give us just a real brief overview. We start forming a homework assignment. We go from there.
All right, short of reading you
Right.
these, we've clustered these into the big categories that were on our scope of action for the year plan.
Yep.
And the very first with this, I'm going to start with strategic investments, candidates for strategic investments. But you may recall that we learned a lot about the need for Spanish-based benchmarking and monitoring tools, particularly that would help our Spanish dual language programs be ready to and participate in the response to intervention programs.
When you say Spanish, you mean ELL?
Uh,
Multiple languages or retarded?
Right now,
Latino?
Spanish was the Spanish base was the primary recommendation. I'm going to call on Yvonne, who is our resident expert in this area, to see what she'd like to add to flesh that out.
So these are assessments that are in the Spanish language, and so just to explain, when you do the RTI process, you have to have benchmarking and progress monitoring measures in English, which we have. Some people use DIPL, some people use ECBM, some use the MAP program. We don't have any measures that are aligned with Spanish and that are correlated with, in the past, OAKS and are now recorrelated with Smarter Balance to use to help inform which kids need interventions and how those interventions are doing for students.
Okay, so
what we're calling out is that there are more and more dual language, Spanish, English, dual language schools that are serving our ELL students. And we don't know how they're doing in literacy in their native language without some assessment.
okay, you understand, I'm just trying to clarify. In my mind,
Okay.
ELL means 27 plus languages important public.
Right,
But-
that's different than that.
And I also, okay, and then I also think of the equity lens and the statistics we've seen where the performance of our African American and our Latino kids. Are we calling this initiative out toward the Spanish immersion issue? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's not immersion, because Spanish immersion would be total immersion schools, which we don't have too many of them in the state, and typically not a lot of ELLs are in the total immersion schools. This is where where districts are using dual language programs as the best practice model to serve students in gaining literacy. The best practice shows us that when you put ELL kids in a dual language school where they gain literacy in their native language first, they can transfer to English much more quickly if that's done effectively. And so more and more schools in Oregon and across the country, in fact, I think the number's like 14 or 17 dual language schools in this state for Spanish English for serving ELL. So it's a growing number, but we're going to end up back light years back if we don't have assessments to measure the effectiveness of those programs. Currently, the EBCBM does have K-1-2 measures, but doesn't have them the rest of the way up. And the EBCBM, as you'll see later, is the one that we're sort of recommending they do because it's just a matter of finishing it up. It's also the assessment that's being used for the KRA. So, for example, in my district, where 3 of our schools are dual language schools, and every single ELL kid whose preferred language is that is Spanish, they get literacy instruction in Spanish first for 3 years before they get English. They still get ELD, but they don't get the literacy instruction. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, thanks.
So we really are targeting ELL kids, but this is specifically ELL kids that are in dual language schools that we need to know their literacy level in Spanish.
Okay.
The second item on this list that also relates to English language learners in this case, we heard and looked at in depth data that was provided by Brian Reeder from the Oregon Department of Education that looked at students who exited EL programs prior to entering high school and the impact on their likelihood of graduating from high school. And we found that actually those that exited did better than those who had never been served in an EL program. However, those who were continuing on had very poor outcomes. And so this specific item is to request that ODE and their Education Equity Unit look at the conditions and the practices and the programs that are resulting in our state in EL students making very significant progress by 8th grade. And then finding mechanisms to replicate those practices in districts that really already have shown us they have very low graduation rates for these EL learners.
As I listen to these, and yes, let's bring it back, that great conversation.
That was in December,
That was a while ago.
January.
Just one thought as you write this, Hilda, it needs to make sure and align to our OEIB and ODE strategic
Oh,
plans.
it will.
I mean,
That's part of what
the
we have
wording.
to do. Yeah, the question templates
Okay.
are very clear.
I just want to make that sure, because we sometimes forget that. We sometimes forget that we have a giant
Good
strategic plan on this issue.
And in this case, we will also be referencing the state English language strategic plan, which was approved by this subcommittee last year.
There you go. Kind of nice to correlate
Yes.
what we already decided on
The next item here, this resulted from testimony and a report that we received from a work group convened by the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators looking at the digital gaps in our schools. And this was a rather innovative solution that came forward as a means of finding the funding necessary to be able to bring equity to our school districts. We know that some school districts have been able to use their funding to provide students with digital devices that they can take home. And the research is pretty clear that that's a helpful tool for students to continue the learning past the school day, but we know that's inequitable across the state. And so the suggestion here is that legislators explore the use of kicker refund money to fund that based on a formula that would be developed by the Oregon Department of Education that establishes districts that have great need but also have a readiness evidence that say, we'll actually use these tools. We can show you how these tools will be used on a regular basis to expand learning.
So that
After school
bullet
day.
was the broadband. That was an equity of.
Not necessarily, you'll see another one later.
Okay, so is that all encompassing with devices and
This is one
professional development?
specifically around the devices.
Okay, not the broadband,
It's coming.
okay.
Moving on, and we really appreciate, questions?
Next.
comments?
You know, I just want to ask, do you want to get specific about what the funding source was? I mean, you know, if you're saying, did you say use kicker money?
Well, the belief was that this would be not something that we would ask for the general fund to support. That was why that came through so specifically.
There's a lot of feeling about kicker money, so as soon as you start attaching it to the kicker money, you're dealing with a much bigger political issue, where if you said, you need to do this and there needs to be an investment, it would leave it up to, you know, the people who are trying to ultimately figure out all the budget stuff to. Yep.
I agree, the word kicker is going to change the conversation. And I think what the intent, I remember from COSA, was that this can't be general fund money. It's almost like the school facility conversation. There needs to be bonding capacity, there needs to be another revenue source to make sure that everywhere in the state of Oregon, kids have enough access to high-speed internet.
And you might want to say
Yeah.
that general fund is.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would put the sidebars on it, you're concerned about.
So there's support from members to make that edit.
And that makes sense to me. Mark, I agree with you. I think COSA was, the intention from COSA is that we do need a funding stream, but we don't want to start having carve-outs of the state school fund money.
Exactly.
Right, we don't want, we know that this has to be an ongoing additional fund somewhere.
Great. So the next one, and I want to first of all thank Teacher Standards and Practices Commission, Teach Oregon, and our deans from public and private institutions who were so generous of their time this year to come in and share updates, insights, suggestions, and answer questions that we had around educator preparation, since that's a major element of educator quality. This particular one was embedded in last year's strategic EL English learner plan that was approved by this committee, and TSPC has moved quickly to incorporate this requirement within the standards. And yet we know from looking nationally at other states where we've infused the basic concepts and strategies for working with EL students into the general curriculum, that doesn't happen magically by simply writing a standard and saying it must be in the program. And so we've looked closely at the state of Florida that did this 20 years ago, no, 15 years ago. And we've also been in touch with a researcher at the University of Central Florida who has written about this extensively and who has some models and some designs for how they've been able to support the educator prep faculty in helping them gain the knowledge necessary to know how to incorporate and what to incorporate into a broad array of the classes, including very exciting things like cases and the use of videos and avatars, and I'm just going to leave that there for you to question later. So that is a specific item on this list under educator quality. Questions or comments? And moving on, we felt very strongly that the work that's begun through the strategic investments in the culturally and linguistically diverse pipeline and recruit and retention grants is a good start. We also applaud the fact that Teach Oregon projects have incorporated this work into their major goals for the 5 projects that are happening in the state. But we also heard from our rural counterparts that there is still a tremendous need to look at solutions for recruiting and retaining teachers and administrators in rural districts. Some people described it as a revolving door. And the fact that even, they'd get somebody great, and then right next door, there'd be a county that would be able to hire them away with a little higher salary. And so this was a call out that not only do we support the continued funding for the recruitment and retention pipeline grants, but we also think there should be a designated amount that's just for rural needs.
Great. Any thoughts on the phone? Yvonne, Lynn?
No, I'm mostly listening because Hilda and I have been a great amount of work on this, and so I'm just mostly listening to the committee and seeing what your guys' desires are as we move forward.
Okay. Want to move on?
So,
We're kind of giving a flyby today anyways without any decision, so. Yvonne, you were gonna?
no, that wasn't me. No, no.
That was Lynn, I think it was me, but I just want to concur with the discussion of removing the kicker discussion.
Okay.
Great,
Got
we
it.
have a 50% response rate on that already.
Okay,
Yeah.
you want to move on to 11:14?
Yes, so this next section is looking at policy changes, and these could happen at a district level, a state level, or a federal level. But we feel that these would be actions that would support best practices, that would help close the achievement gap, and of course, deal with transition barriers. The very first one is that we know that the current work of Teach Oregon and the Teacher Standards and Practices Commission involvement in the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, that's the new national accrediting agency. We are a part of an alliance in Oregon with CAPE, and with this work, we think that TSPC will be able to, in the next biennium, identify and call out specific best practices that impact clinical experiences, whether it be around co-teaching models, selection and training of co-teachers, the incentives necessary to get our very best model teachers out there, all of that, and then they can take action to embed those in program approval standards. I'm looking at Keith while I say that, because he certainly has talked to me about the need to do this. We also believe that the initial conversation that was brought forward to this committee by Scott Fletcher on behalf of the Oregon Association of Colleges of Teacher Education pointed to the fact that a common institutional profile that identifies some basic information about how do programs function, how long are they, how many credits, their costs, their admission criteria, their acceptance rates, their employment rates would be valuable knowledge for both our employers as well as potential candidates. And so we encourage TSPC to incorporate those common elements into the annual reports that are required of educator prep programs. Questions, comments?
Not about that, but I've got some comments on the flow of the document. Okay?
Okay,
The first ones we described were investments.
that's correct.
You've now moved to policy.
That's correct.
Then I looked down a little further on, you got call-outs for early learning, 1114, our major. Why are those not in the strategic investment section?
Because, first of all, some of these will be, some of the call-outs is work that's already underway that does not require additional strategic investments or may be already identified by another agency as part of their budget request.
Okay, so just to get to it, when I look at like early learning and the hubs, we've invested heavily in those. On June 25th, Early Learning Council will present that. We're looking toward continued funding for the hubs, are we not?
We felt as though the Oregon Department of Education Early Learning Council has some specific identified needs that will come through their agencies.
Okay.
This is again based specifically on those areas that we feel like others are not going to be paying attention to these. They may be around specific transition points. They may be around information that was brought to our attention this year.
There is a governor process that's going along, budgeting process, and we're all working together on this. So the intention is not that we double up, that we're aware of all the strategies and certain people are working on them. And that's definitely something to be looking at by the early learning council.
So the next one under policy recommendations is one for the Oregon Education Investment Board. And that is that we heard so much this year, we just heard again today about the impact of remediation and support for students, whether it be through a course or just those student support services that are necessary to help students move through their programs. So the recommendation was that OEIB consider how participation and completion rates in support services and remedial education, as well as persistence rates for students, could be somehow incorporated into the future metrics that are already in place on the achievement compacts. The thinking behind this was it is wonderful to count completers, but there is also, and maybe this is not the right wording, but there's a necessity to call out and acknowledge the hard work that goes into some institutions where they're really helping students who have a lot of other challenges that they're overcoming. And this specifically came as some conversations with people who are engaged in those kinds of programs, saying, you know, there's nothing in the Achievement Compacts that really calls this out and says, this takes a priority investment by the college administrators. It isn't like, let's pick the easiest students that will go through their programs the fastest. The next one is on transforming learning through digital conversion. And this is where we doubled up with a recommendation that was in the Accelerated Learning Report or concept paper, that there is momentum to put some nudging in place with our federal legislators around E-rates that could be utilized in a way that would help increase broadband connectivity for schools that need access for students. And this was where we were very aware of the gaps that occur across the state geographically, and looking for some other help from the federal government on this. There are several initiatives underway. We just want to bring this to the attention of our federal legislators of how important their actions could be to support this. Moving on, these are the call-outs. These are things that we're aware of that are either already being recommended by other agencies or our work that's already underway. The very first one is really looking at the recommendations that the Oregon Department of Education presented to the OEIB board last month around early learning and full-day kindergarten, early literacy, early literacy K-3 and full-day kindergarten. And there was a note here that we wanted to reinforce the need to make sure that all Oregon students would have access to full-day kindergarten by 2015. Moving on to English language learners, this was a call out to acknowledge work that's currently underway as a result of the strategic plan in ODE and the Oregon Department of Education by the Education Equity Group to actually provide a Spanish summative reading assessment that aligns with the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium tool.
You know, Hilda, I don't see one reference in here to the Common Core. And I'm just putting that out there to consider that there are several initiatives that are dominant right now in K-12 that are alluded to, but aren't called out that I'd like to see, and that's the Common Core implementation / Smarter Balance. Somewhere reference in there.
Can I point out something?
Yeah.
There's a legislative bill that was passed, and of course I'm very blank on the number right now, that allocated $30 to around 33 million for the next future bienniums that is designated that must continue supporting certain efforts within the network, including Common Core implementation, et cetera. So it's not as though that got forgotten. Those initiatives will still receive some funding to move forward.
I'm with you. I think we're in this document.
Yes,
That
I hear you on that.
that
We
needs to be
definitely will reference it.
And I would also reference the amount of work being done with the matrix on the
Ed
educator.
effectiveness.
It's in there. You have a TSB's efforts to align evaluation tools with the state framework for educator effectiveness. It's bigger than that with the sentence.
Okay. Also, the second part that cut over on the next page was we were supportive of the Oregon Department of Education's work around a potential biliteracy seal that would be established for students graduating from high school who demonstrated meet the level of proficiency there. And we felt that that complemented the Equity Lens's view of second language as an asset. Moving on to the call-outs for transforming learning through digital conversion. We support in this document efforts that are underway in Rob Saxton's shop to add additional FTE to provide strategic leadership and strategic planning necessary to move the state forward on implementation of a plan for digital learning and expansion. We had understood that there was less than a 0.5 dedicated to that currently. And with that, we recognize the need to transform and personalize learning through the kinds of high-quality digital curriculum. There was a lot of discussion about the fact there's not a real mechanism yet for vetting what is high-quality curriculum, so we're not trying to step in and suggest that here, but we're certainly calling that out, that the age of textbooks may disappear in the future, and we want to make sure that that's called out. In terms of educator quality, there's still a continued work underway that we think is very laudable, that aligns the efforts of tools used with the candidate as they're getting ready to become an educator with the tools that will be used as they move into a job in Oregon. And I want to applaud some folks that have already done that work to make sure the candidates don't see it as something I do over here at this level when I'm getting ready to be a teacher, and they just totally are shocked when they move into a job and go, oh my goodness, I'm going to be evaluated on these things over here.
Maybe we can embed a little STEM wording in that.
I could circle back with you afterwards and get more of an idea on
Yeah.
your thoughts there.
I guess this all is good, just as I'm listening to it, reading it, and I understand where it's going. It's going to be merged into future work, I get that. I'm just trying to keep us aligned to some pretty fundamental things that we have said from day one: early learning, 11 to 14, STEM, equity.
We know we have a STEM council too that's bringing forward
I know.
recommendations.
I know. You hear what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. The next
So
one.
I think, can I just add something, Mark? I'm just trying to think about what's in the document and where we would pull out OEIB, Common Core State Standards, and I agree with you, there's already a lot of work going forward. I think we were looking at this document as what else hasn't yet been addressed. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and we can go back and look at it, and what would be helpful is if you look at the items, are there places where you see we can integrate that? Clearly in the kindergarten recommendation we can. Probably all of them relate to that, including the Spanish measures that are aligned with Common Core. And so I don't know if that's what you want to do generally, or if there's some that really.
No, I'm with you completely, and I think that's my responsibility and everybody else's, that we have that homework assignment, to get that information back.
Okay.
More than anything, while Hilda's going through it, I'm just thinking out loud, and I'm just kind of, playing with a little bit here, that to me, as an OEIB board member, we have spent a lot of time investing and talking about the right things, and are trying to bring a focus on P20. and when I hear things, comments about OEIB or this or that, we have done, I think, an admirable job of keeping the conversation on 40-40-20, P20, early learning, 11 to 14. This is vernacular Oregon never even used to have. We need time to implement. And this is more just a 60,000 foot level, but it affects this paper. And when I continue to see more and more, well, we can do this over here, we can do this over here, I just want to be the guy that's kind of in the room saying, let's pull it back to a couple core concepts and implement. You hear what I'm saying? I'm looking at this right now thinking that's a heck of a lot of work for another subcommittee. And I just want to be cautious of that. That's just what I'm saying.
This one
So
probably.
Mark, this is Lynn, and I want to just I want to double second that notion. I think the concern, and we expressed this, we talked about this in Pendleton with Rob Saxton, is that the increasing levels of complexity and sophistication do not serve our purpose. And we've done that once before with Sim and Cam, and it was a nightmare. And I'm not saying this is like that. I'm saying from a communication standpoint only, this is got to be streamlined.
Well, that's the
And
intent
I
of
would-
this whole meeting, is that this is your document now for you to cull, for you to edit, for you to select and prioritize.
Yes, but I would suggest that I have to believe there's a communication person in the Department of Education who should take a run at it before we do that. I mean, part of the thing that we're struggling on the early learning side is keeping it simple enough to be attractive and sellable. And again, I'm sure that there's a need for all the documents for these initiatives to be easily understood by every legislator not at a specialist level, not even at Mark's level or my level, but at a taxpayer level. And so I'm not saying the content isn't appropriate. I'm saying there's another step here, and I don't think it's up to this committee to do that kind of staff work of taking this and writing it in a way that is coherent to the routine reviewer. And so I do think there is another step here in this document before we deal with it that addresses the fact, and it may be something as simple, from a communication standpoint, the easiest way to kind of get focused is to say all of these efforts are driven by the Common Core, the 40-40-20, pick your 5 key policies that you are enforcing with all these initiatives and efforts, et cetera. Because right now, that to me is apparent in multiple settings that we're creating opportunities for people to criticize the efforts because it's simply become inaccessible to them. So I'm just saying, I think the easy thing to do, and it's common practice when you're trying to effectively sell change, is to take what is produced here and hand it to a professional communicator for editing and refinement and improvement before it goes public or before we take it up. Because, again, Mark's spot on. The Common Core piece does not come through clearly. And so, enough said, but that would be my recommendation, is to give it a professional communications run through before we do final editing or improvements, because we're not there yet.
The only thing that I would suggest is that if you all, remember, this was the list. This is not, this is the list that you have the opportunity to say, these are not a priority right now. And I would just recommend that if we could do the first step of culling through what are the highest priorities for the committee members, and then give that work to the communication folks to help us with language, rather than have them work on all of it and then later we say, oh, only half of this is going forward. And remember, some of these items are not requiring any legislative action. They are simply, as the name of the committee suggests, calling out best practices that are already in place. So I hear very closely that we need a strong introduction, but I would love it if the next step was that the subcommittee could actually cull through this list before we engage our colleagues and communication experts.
There's a calling idea. Is that even correct?
Yeah, it's
Is that
probably
even such
a
a
verb.
word? Okay. When I read through it, I see what we've talked about over the last couple of years. You and Yvonne have captured it beautifully, okay? And I see money here that's needed. I see policy that's needed. And I've seen some call-out alignment to what else is going on. Is there a way to have an introduction that you could get in the, the whole 40, 40, 20, P20, Common Core, et cetera?
Right.
Okay? But then, can you say, okay, these are, from the best practice in student transitions, these are our biggies, okay? English language learners. Summary, investment,
Okay.
policy. Put it all together.
Yeah, we
Boom.
can do that.
That's category. Then the next category, digital conversion.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Then I can see.
This
it.
is a worksheet for you. I thought it'd be easier if you did it
Oh.
by the policies, by the actions, but that's so easy to do, it's like,
And I don't know if, I'm just speaking for Mark as a visual learner. I'm a kind of a one-page guy.
No, I totally agree, Mark. I'm a visual learner too, so that's probably the reason both of us are, but that's a great proposal.
And then, Hilda, if you could format it in that way to me, then I can say, yeah, those are all priorities for me. And I can even tell you to me what's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then, that's really what our work is it not? Then to move it on to the next group and merge it with everything else that's working.
perfect.
So I just wanted to say one thing, and I apologize to Hilda because she actually had it in that format when we worked, and what I thought was confusing was when you put it by topic area, then you end up with funding initiatives mixed up with policies mixed up with call-outs. But if that's easier for you guys to see it that way, that's fine. I just think it's going to be hard to prioritize for members who are not in this conversation right now. So I guess we'll have to think about what that strategy is for prioritizing.
Well, when you think of what our outcome is, Yvonne, our outcome is this. This is a subcommittee that has been working independently. It's been working on some various initiatives. I think you've captured every one of them beautifully. And we're moving on a paper that's going to move forward the agenda, but it's just one document that's supporting what our work has done to be merged by other folks. That's our outcome, correct? So I think the simpler it is to see with the priorities, and we're saying ELL is that's a big deal, and here's what we mean, just like you described today about the Spanish piece, Yvonne. This is a policy thing, and it's also an investment thing. Isn't that simple enough?
Certainly we'll work on it. What I may do is, develop a rough template and send it to folks and say, is this going to do it before I go through the whole conversion?
Absolutely. I think that's our response, that's our homework, and I
Great.
think that's our homework for the folks
Thank
that
you.
aren't here too.
I'm not going to spend time going through all of the tasks and actions because I think they are listed here for you to read. But if there were any specific ones that you already looked at and I have no idea what that is, I'd be happy to answer questions on that.
Okay, great. So Lynn, Yvonne, any closure on this agenda item?
No, and I think it's helpful for me to hear about the challenges around how we organize it. And again, I want to be clear, the effort here is not to, we're all driving towards getting this to kind of a momentum point. I just think that using consistent language helps everyone in a complex environment, and that's, I think we've achieved that with the proposal that was just outlined. So thank you. I appreciate the extra effort.
Absolutely. It's very well done. I mean, you guys have captured what we've been talking about beautifully. It's just a matter of cutting and pasting it in my mind. Okay, let's go ahead and move to item 8.0, public testimony. We have one individual who's requested time, and that is Dr. La Vega. And I'll read our little thing. Members of the public wanting to give public testimony must sign in, which you did. There'll be only one speaker from each group. Each individual or group spokesman will have 3 minutes. So, Dr. Lovega? Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Should I, can I
Yes.
stay back here or?
And,
do you
no,
need me
come
to-
up to the microphone and for the record, state your name and your affiliation.
Okay,
I know SB from years.
yes. Officially, my name is Esperanza, Dr. Esperanza de la Vega, but most people call me SB, and I'm an assistant professor at Portland State University and coordinator of the Bilingual Teacher Pathway Program. And I'm going to give myself 2 minutes for my comments. First of all, I've been really happy to serve on the Instructional Assistant Career Pathway Program Committee and the report, and was pleased with the work that and the conversations that happened as we got together and thought about these treasures, because I do believe that our instructional assistants are our treasures and in our public schools. I see that there are some complementary agenda items, and I'm stealing Hilda's term. Part of the OEIB and the move in Oregon seems to be looking at diversifying the workforce, the minority education pipeline, the move from the equity office at ODE for dual immersion programs. So all of these are complementary to the instructional assistant career pathway. And so that's really a great thing. My concern is about the alignment between this goal, this worthy goal, and I feel it's a moral imperative in the state of Oregon to actually diversify our teaching workforce and to gain more individuals who are bilingual and who bring their linguistic and cultural assets to the classroom. And there seems to be a tension or imbalance between the testing requirements that are currently in place that create these barriers for the individuals, and I feel like we need to have more conversation about that. It's almost like having a cog, 2 cogs kind of almost there but not quite aligned, and I could see in the future that the system's going to get stuck if we don't take time now to really think clearly and profoundly about this alignment. And I think that is my 2 minutes and basically my call for more conversations around this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that this is testimony, we're supposed to just listen, but I appreciate that. I know that testing thing is an issue. I mean, it puts up, anyway, that's my comment on public testimony. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you staying home meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so finishing up here, Hilda, is
So
all
here
of
are
that highlighted still accurate?
So here are the tasks. Hilda's going to revamp the organization of this document and not do the whole thing. I'm going to send it out as a little, oh, this is what it would look like. And that will probably happen 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So then I would love maybe a quick turnaround from the subcommittee members with suggestions. And then I'll go ahead and finish that out, and that should get to folks about 5 days later. And then, in the meantime, Kathy Clark will be scheduling a phone conference so that once we get a return on this, and I have to sit down with the calendar, I might be off a day or 2 here because we're bumping up. For the Outcomes and Investments Committee, Dr. Curtis and I have to sit down and work that through and get that ready at least a week before the July 24th meeting. So I think that's kind of the essence of it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what we discussed.
Okay. Oh, and obviously, our phone call meeting will be public notice, so everybody will be informed when we're having that phone call.
Okay. Any final comments, Yvonne or Len? Appreciate you hanging in there, out there on phone land.
No, thank you, Mark, for taking on the role of sharing, so I didn't have to fly back to Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely. I got your back.
Thank you.
Len, anything?
No, good to go. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Hilda?
Just need to note that we're finishing early, which I think is a historical moment for the subcommittee.
It's all about facilitation. We're adjourned.